Hello, good evening. Welcome to the class, Project Management, Nassau Community College, Continuing Education. My name is Pete Landini. I'll be with you for the next 7 out of the next 8 weeks. We'll talk about the schedule in just a minute. This is going to be a challenging class. There's no doubt about it. I normally have been teaching this class now for the past 5 or 6 years for Nassau and Suffolk County Community Colleges, and this is the first go at it in an online remote forum, medium. So the class is designed for live in person. I'm trying to work with things so that it can become a little more geared towards the situation we're in, and maybe a little bit more entertaining for you, to say the least. We have a 3-hour and 30-minute class. We'll see how that goes. 3 hours and 30 minutes is a lot of time to be sitting in front of a screen, especially if that's what you were doing all day. If you're in one of those situations that you're working from home, this might be a continuation for what has been a long day, and you know, your eyes might be tired, and I'm sorry. I didn't cause this situation, but I tried to respond to it. So actually, I suggested this. I proposed this to Nassau Community College for my previous class that was in progress to finish up on in this format. We took care of that last session using YouTube Live and the same setup. On Monday night, it was a Six Sigma, Lean Six Sigma class that had started in person at the college, and finished up our last class in this format. And although there are challenges, everybody made it out alive. I got some excellent feedback in terms of everything that was accomplished, and everything that was achieved, and everything that was conducted during the class under the circumstances. I actually got a comment back how this is very convenient that without the commute and without having to leave the home, and maybe with other types of conditions that you might have, that this actually comes in handy as an option. So who knows what the future is going to bring with the classes. They're already asking me to figure on summer classes being conducted in this format as well. I'm a people person. I thrive on the energy of others, and my class is generally that of a response. So this is difficult for me to adapt to in a way that I don't have that energy. I could read your comments, and we're going to interact as much as possible. And I am experimenting with a couple of other ideas based on some feedback I've gotten since Monday. But this is a brave new world for me. It's a brave new world for you. We're going to just have to take it one step at a time. The core of it is you're going to get the material. We're going to cover the same material that we would have covered had we been in a live, face-to-face classroom scenario. So the material will be the same. You will have the opportunity to stop me in my tracks and say, hey, I didn't understand that, or I didn't understand something you said. Use the chat feature, and I will go back and address them. There's 19 students in this class, so there's 20 folks on this line, including myself. So be patient as far as how much I can do to get to your comments if I'm being flooded with them, right? So hopefully we have enough interaction, but I don't get overwhelmed with it. We'll just have to play that one note at a time and see what kind of music we play. I'm seeing a lot of hellos there. Great. what I'm going to ask is to avoid the chat for chatting purposes, right? So the hellos and welcomes and everything, we'll keep off the chat. I will know you're here because of our attendance sheet. So I'm going to go through that in a moment. So we'll all get on board with that. And again, Brave New World. We'll see how that goes. Adapt and evolve and go forward with that. So again, this is the project management class. I could tell it's the project management class because it says so on the screen right next to me. Okay, so we're all in the right place. Again, I'm Pete. My name is Pete Landini. You all received the email from me. If you didn't receive the email from me, you wouldn't have the link to sign on to this. So I'm assuming that everybody got the link. And on the link, I also asked you to access the Google folder where all the course materials will be held and the attendance sheet. So we'll go through that in a moment as well. If anybody had a problem either signing in or did not get my email, and maybe you had to, call the college or speak with somebody other than myself to get access to it, let me know. This would be a perfect time if you have to use the chat. Let me know if you had any problems getting on or if you didn't receive my email, because that's something we need to address early so that the rest of these 7 classes go smoothly. Just looking around and saying, okay, so the chat, quite a few of you have figured out how to use the chat. It's pretty intuitive, but you need to have either a Google ID or a YouTube ID in order to use it. So if you're on and you're saying, oh, I don't know, how am I going to use this chat? It's not available to me. You can create an ID. It's no cost. It's free. No obligations whatsoever. It's through YouTube and Google. If you have a Gmail ID, a Gmail account, you automatically get it. If you have any other Google products, you would automatically have it. If you don't have any Google products, you have, a company issued where you work email address, or you work with a Verizon or Optimum email address or Hotmail or something like that, you can just create the ID. You don't have to even set up a Gmail account. You can just set it up for YouTube and you can participate in the chat. I hope that everybody does that if you haven't already, so that if you have questions or want to stop me, that's the only communication that I have coming in. Now, if you have my email address and you don't have access to the chat and you're having a problem creating an ID, I'm not going to be able to check emails real time as we're going on with the class, but I can check them either periodically during a little break in the action, or certainly after this class is finished, and we can resolve that. Hi, Nadine. Is anybody having an issue seeing the live video? Mine started buffering. So what I've been warned, and this isn't only for YouTube, it's for the whole internet, with everybody working from home and everybody on these live videos. I mean, Zoom seems to be a popular platform for business. Seems to be a lot of Facebook Live. There's so many of these. There's the amount of video that's being carried over the networks is tremendous. And I actually got a warning from StreamYard, who I'm using to use as a production facility, as a front end to YouTube. They said, yeah, there's a lot of activity. You may experience some trouble. You may end up seeing some intermittent issues, and exactly what Amber is saying. You have to refresh the page. If you see me stop motion, or the screen goes blank, refresh the page, go in and out. I would, if you're on a laptop or a computer, that works great. If you're on a tablet, or an iPad, you might have to actually exit out of the application and come back in, right? But basically, you have to refresh your connection to some extent. Tabbing back on the stream and refresh the page. Yeah. So basically, that's that's going to be the rule of the road. Or be patient. Sometimes it'll just go away by itself if you give it, what seems to be an eternity of 10, 15 seconds, right? You may see it, just kind of catch itself and refresh. My Wi-Fi might be intermittent. I might experience a lag, or I might experience a blip where my picture, my broadcast is interrupted. Okay, in that case, again, be patient. You might think it's you and refresh. We'll have to get through it. There's nothing we could do about it. I can't even change platforms, and that wouldn't even change it because it's just the internet in general. Okay, yeah, most of you seem to be responding fine to that. Okay, good. Delays. So in addition to the networks being stressed because of the activity that we're seeing, these days on just the internet networks in general, built into this platform, and most platforms for that matter, have some type of a latency, right? There's a latency between when I'm speaking and when you're hearing it. Okay, so I believe it's about 8 to 10 seconds on average. So you might type a question in for me where it asks me to stop, yet I appear to continue going. It's not that I'm ignoring you. It's not that I'm casting you aside. It's that I might not have seen it yet, and for that matter, I just have to catch up every once in a while and get to them. So again, you'll get used to this, but for this first night, it might be a little trying and challenging to get used to. Okay. So with that, a couple of things. I'm going to share my screen with you right here. That's a screen share, right? I could screen share full screen. You should still hear my voice. I could screen share and just pop up into the corner, or I could do as we were before. You see my big face and just have the presentation as a small kind of a thumbnail. Okay. When I am in this mode, when I am here, and I'm working with the presentation itself, I don't have access to the chat. So I'll be going, if you're typing something else in addition to the latency, I'm just kind of out of pocket at that point. I'm on my other document and I don't see the comments. So I'm going to periodically go back so that I can see the comments for any point in time. So you may see me, and I'll probably announce it. Hey, I'm going to go back, see if there are any comments. Go to the comment page, address anything if it's there. If there are not, return back to the presentation and go back to lecture. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, so I want to get to the share. I think it's okay. So if I come up here, okay. So now you should see the project management slides, and I'm going to go through the first couple. Again, some housekeeping stuff. Let's go through a little bit about the course syllabus. Again, there's my email if you need to contact me anytime between now and next Thursday. If you have any questions, comments, misunderstandings, etc., you can contact me. Entry-level course in project management. I know typically in these classes, many of you are either in a project management role with or without the official title, right? Some of you might be in a position that you work with project managers, but are not one, and you're aspiring to become one, right? It might be a career path type of thing. Or it just might be that, you've really not worked in a project environment at all, and you're just looking to learn about it because it might be something you potentially would be interested in. I just want to put you all at ease that this is an entry-level course that's going to address all of those needs. For those of you without any life experience in project management, this class is going to take things from the ground up, introduce you to the terminology, introduce you to the methodologies, introduce you to the tools and techniques that are used to effectively manage a project. Okay? For those of you who may have been doing it for a while or just started with or without the title, because you know how it is. Sometimes, sometimes you're asked to do things that are outside the scope of your actual job description, and project management sometimes falls into that category, especially if you're somebody with a high degree of organizational skills, a high degree of ability to get things done, experience in your particular area of expertise, and have the confidence of the organization that you can succeed in a project management role. You may be asked to step forward, right, and take on project management responsibilities, even though that's not your job title, even though that's not what you do all the time, right? But on occasion, you might be asked to do that. So this will give you some tools of the trade. And what it'll also do is standardize your thinking, standardize your vocabulary, standardize the methodology, so that what you're doing turns into a best practice approach, right? You could succeed on the backs of others who've done it before, okay? And utilize different tools that can make it easier for you to do what the organization might be asking you to do. For those of you who have been doing this for a while, project management, maybe it is your job title. You might be a project manager. You might be a senior project manager. You might be an area manager with certain project responsibilities. You might be a project coordinator or a project expediter, that you're working on specific aspects of a project. This class will give you, again, the standardization of the project management profession. Guess why that's good? Well, it makes your career portable. Right? You're no longer just stuck in the position that you're at now within your organization. If something should happen that your career path does not move forward in the organization you're in, or something opens up in a different division within your organization that operates completely different than how you've been accustomed to work within the same company, or your company gets acquired by another company. This COVID-19 is the job market is going to be in a tizzy. There's the economics. There's going to be what an effect it's going to have, and no crystal ball. Who knows what's going to happen? One can only expect that there's going to be certain companies that don't survive this. Right? There's going to be other industries that don't survive this. There's going to be adaptation and evolution through the changes brought on by this economic environment, this impact of this pandemic. There's going to be companies that have value, but then not the resources to maintain that value. And they might get gobbled up by other organizations that do have the resources, but not the expertise in a particular area. So mergers and acquisitions, all these things, are likely to happen, or at least probably, at least there's a probability. So what does that mean to you? It means that you might be working one day for an organization that has a very casual approach to project management, and all of a sudden, next week, you're part of a larger organization or a more formalized organization that now has different rules in place and expects you to ramp up quickly. Having this standardized background will give you a leg up on making that transition. So these are all good things, right? And that is in addition to professional certification, right? So we say that this course is designed to teach the methodology and best practices that can be applied immediately. That's important to me to teach to you, that you can use this for practical purposes. But at the same time, be consistent, totally consistent, 100% consistent, so that you can sit for a professional certification exam. And it's going to be in the same language that you're used to speaking in, listening to, and working in for these 7 weeks. Okay? So the two, the primary certification exam that we cover during this class is the CAPM certification. We'll talk a little bit about that now, but we'll talk a lot more about it in our 7th and final week. Between now and that 7th and final week, you could do some research on your own, right? Have questions, but do your own research and answer your own questions. There's a lot of information out there. And then on the 7th week, when we wrap things up, then I'll devote, probably half our session into answering any questions you have about how you can apply for the test, where to take the test, how to prepare for the test, what score you have to get, what viability, how much does it cost, where do I go to take the test, etc., and so on. Things, and the reason why, even more so than before, is things are changing rapidly. I just received a notification yesterday, right? This is yesterday, that the CAPM test has always, from the last 2 years, I believe, has been available that you could take the exam online at home. Okay? That exists. The PMP exam, right? PMP Professional Project Manager. You need experience, 3 to 5 years worth of experience in order to sit for the exam. You have to substantiate that in a resume that needs to be accounted for. CAPM is no experience necessary. CAPM is the entry-level certification for project managers. I understand the course material, I understand the methodology, but I'm a beginner at heart, okay? PMP is the professional certification for project management. That requires 3 to 5 years experience leading and directing project activities. Okay. That exam has been announced that they are going to um, make that available online as well in the coming weeks. Right? They just announced that up until now, PMP exam, you had to go to a testing center, right, and take the exam in a testing center. Um, they're moving towards the option that you could take it online at home, because in response to the COVID-19 restrictions on travel and gathering and going to a testing center. I believe the testing centers are closed at this point. So even if you were scheduled to take your PMP test this week, you would have received a refund at this point, or asked to reschedule sometime into the future, because the testing centers are closed. In a few weeks, they'll have another option for you. So that's good to know. And like I said, I don't want to give you information now that's going to be outdated by week 7. So week 7, we'll go through the whole thing, soup to nuts. The required text for the class. The required text for the class is a guide to the project management body of knowledge. It's known as the PMBOK, P-M-B-O-K, Project Management Body of Knowledge Guide. PMBOK Guide, 6th edition, very important 6th edition. It's published by the Project Management Institute. I think it was September of 2017. It is the most current edition of the body of knowledge, and it's required for this class because that is the basis for the exams. Okay? If you're going to take this class, you might not know at this point whether or not you're going to take the exam. But if you do, you want to have invested these past 7 weeks learning from the true source material and not from another book that might be somebody else's interpretation of what that source material is. You'll get an interpretation from me, right? But I want you to have, I want you to have the black and white pages of the actual source. So if my attempt at familiarizing some of the concepts to you, or giving you examples, or um, um, making it more accessible to you, just doesn't work for you, you'll always have the true source material in the body of knowledge. Okay, and what we'll do is have reading assignments each week. So what I don't want you to do is, there's no need to read ahead. There's no need to read ahead. There's no need to have read anything coming into this this class tonight, right? However, going forward, it's a good idea to keep up with the reading as we cover material. Because what we're going to do, how we formulate the class, is 1 week we're going to cover the material. Okay, 1 week we're going to cover the material. Between that Thursday night and the following Thursday night, gives you a chance to fortify that knowledge. Okay, but through your reading and independent study. Okay, read the book through the chapters that correspond with the material we covered in class. Okay. Then the beginning of the next class, the following Thursday, after you've read, you can ask questions. We can do a review. Before we cover any new material, we can ensure that the past week's material was covered in detail. Okay? And then we'll cover the new material, and that cycle begins again for the oncoming weeks. So if you haven't already purchased, order the Project Management Body of Knowledge, and make sure it's the 6th edition. It's available on Amazon. It's available in any other booksellers. But if you go on Amazon, you can also download it on a Kindle if you're comfortable working with an ebook format, which I am, and that's how I have my copy of the Pinbot is through a Kindle version. You can certainly do that, and you'll receive it immediately. I've heard from one of the students that there might be some delays in Amazon shipping, right? I guess if you don't have the Amazon Prime, right? If you have Amazon Prime, you get the free 2-day shipping. It'll probably arrive quicker. But if you don't, and you have to get standard shipping from Amazon, I think that because of the limited workforce and other conditions, that they're having a little trouble getting things out. But if you go with the Kindle version, you download it, you have it within minutes. Right? There are no prerequisites for this class. Right? So we're taking it from the ground up. See the course syllabus for more detailed class information. The course syllabus is out on the Google Drive. Right? So that link to the Google Drive where I refer to an attendance sheet, there's also a syllabus in that same folder, which will tell you the tentative schedule for covering material over the course of the 7 weeks. Okay? It'll tell you that we are meeting every Thursday night, except for April 9th. I believe it's Christian Holy Thursday and Jewish Passover begins. So that's a college holiday. Okay, so we'll meet 7 out of 8 weeks for class, and all that information is going to be on the syllabus, so you could see, what's coming in the following weeks. Okay, attendance. Attendance is required for this class. Okay, attendance is required for this class, and normally when I teach this class in live and in person, attendance is easy. Okay, attendance is done via either a sign-in sheet, or I get to know your names and faces and I check you off on the list. What we're going to do here is have a new little experiment. Right? What we're going to do here is use our Google Sheet. So what I'm going to do is let's do this now, because this, for those of you who have accessed it already, this should be nothing new. But for those of you who either had trouble accessing, this can be kind of like a little tech support session, and we can get used to our attendance sheet. So let me share the screen with you. Let me get my face out of the way here. It's kind of an eye chart to look at on. Kind of an eye chart to look at on the screen. So if you know how YouTube works, you could full screen it, right? So you could full screen it down in the bottom right corner, and that might be more helpful at this time. But in the Google folder, I have a spreadsheet set up to do for attendance. And I see that roughly half of you have found it, have verified that you're into the YouTube and the Google Drive access. So what I'd like to see is that if the rest of you can access this spreadsheet now as we're online. and do two things. If you can hear my voice and see my face, well, or at least see the spreadsheet, your YouTube is working. And if you can access this spreadsheet, your Google Drive access is working. Come down here and click the downward arrow next to your name and update it to verified. Okay? Update it to verified, showing me that you've been able to access the course materials and the online class. And then come over to 3/26, today's date, and P is for present. This will be our attendance. We'll do this every week. Just update it to P. Just do the drop down and select P. Okay. And this will be our way of taking attendance. Look at that. Everybody's here. So I'm seeing a couple of folks that have P, but not verified. Oh, I'm just jumping the gun. I'm going to just back off for about 2 or 3 minutes. Okay. So it looks like everybody's got. I'm just going to call out to see if anybody did not. Um, Brenda Gonzalez is, I think, dropped. I think she's dropped from the class. Feliciano and Andrews Feliciano, and Marvin. Okay, so there's two folks that didn't sign in, so to speak. Marvin and Andrews. Um, let me know if you're here and update the spreadsheet. And if you're having trouble updating the spreadsheet, maybe we'll have to take that offline at this point because I want to move on to actual course material. Okay, so please, as I'm moving on, update the spreadsheet. Can you see it? So, Leslie, can you see it? You updated. If you updated it and you see it, then I could see it. We're sharing the same document. So the answer is yes. But more importantly, um, if I could see it, you could see it. If you could see it, I could see it. Okay, so this should go smoother following weeks. Hopefully, when you sign on, you could just hit the attendance sheet yourself for the following week and every week accordingly. And all I'll have to do is at an appropriate break, just look at it and see if anybody is outstanding and call them out specifically. Okay. Now let me bring up the back to our presentation. Okay. Let me just make sure. Okay. What is a project? This is a project management class. We're going to be talking about the project management context. Tonight we're going to be going into a lot of overview type material. Okay, some terminology, some understanding, some high level stuff that that's going to serve as kind of the backbone in our vocabulary for the rest of the class, right? So we have to start out with what a project might be. Project is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. That means a project isn't everything you do. Some things may feel like they're a project, but they might not be. They might just be what we call operations. It might just be day-to-day activities. It might be ongoing work. That's not a project. A project, by virtue of the definition being temporary endeavor to create a unique product, service, or result. Temporary means it must have a definitive beginning and end. It's going to start at a certain point and end at a certain point. It's not something that's always been here, and it's not something that will always be. There's going to be a finite block of time. Okay? Now, sometimes projects take longer than expected. Okay? Sometimes projects might reach a point where it's undetermined when that end date is going to be because of issues, because of decisions, because of conditions, etc. And you may be unable to predict when that end will be. Okay, that doesn't mean that it's not a project. It just means that you're going to have a best guess at where your end is going to be. You're going to have a range, perhaps, or a placeholder for an end date that there's a lack of confidence in because of the risk, because of the uncertainty, because of the condition. But at the same time, you know that once those conditions are resolved, once those issues are resolved, once those uncertainties become more certain, then you can refine your end date to something that's maybe more predictable. Okay? So it has a definitive beginning and end. And unique means it has to be something that's new or different. Right? It doesn't have to be something that's new that nobody has ever done before, right? If you're in the auto manufacturing business and you have a project to come up with a hybrid, well, Prius has been around for 15, 16 years now, right? It's not new. It might not even be very different, but you're doing it for the first time. Maybe you're manufacturing a hybrid automobile, within your product line for the first time. And there might be something different about it regarding, putting your label on it and making it part of your fleet or making it part of your sales strategy for the next several years. So it's unique only in that it's something that's not ongoing. If you did it yesterday and you're going to do it again tomorrow, or you did it last month and you're going to do it again next month and nothing changes, that's operations. Okay? So it's a good idea to understand the difference between what a project is and what operations is, because managing them is going to be completely different. Okay? There's a different set of rules for being successful in operations management than there would be in being successful in project management. Okay? So we talk about why projects might be initiated. Projects might be initiated because of regulatory, legal, or social requirements. Okay? They may need to comply with a new mandate that would require a project to introduce that change. Right? Social requirements. Banning the use of straws, right, in Starbucks. Right? I believe they've banned the use of straws in Suffolk County. I don't think it's statewide. I'm not sure. So I remember the plastic bags. I lived in Suffolk County. The plastic bags were eliminated in Suffolk County first, and then New York State adopted that just very recently. I think the straws, the drinking straws, are something that is also now businesses have to comply with. But outside of Suffolk County, There might be a social requirement. Starbucks has eliminated the use of the plastic straws nationwide or worldwide for that matter. Right? Why? Because they're doing it as a social requirement. They're doing it as social goodwill, so to speak. They're doing it to be a green company, to look, you know, they're looking to do the right thing. And at the same time, probably a high percentage of Starbucks customers are socially minded and may see that as a step in the right direction and support their organization, support their company. So meeting regulatory, legal, and social requirements can prompt the initiation of a project. Down in the bottom left, we see create, improve, fix product. So create, improve, or fix. Create means you have a new product. You may be looking to fill a new need or innovative. Right? And it doesn't have to be a product. It doesn't have to be that, we're coming out with a new automobile or a new holding up a pen or a new product, tangible product. It could be a new process by which your products are sold, right? If if you come up with an app to sell your product, or an app that would service your product, and there's a new process around customer service related to mobile users, let's say, right? So you might have processing that initiates a project in order to support that new process. Okay, and services, right? You may be offering additional services to customers of your product line, and a project will be put in place to support those services. On the top right, satisfy stakeholder requests and needs. Right? These are ideas coming in from the outside. I'll first say what a stakeholder is. Stakeholder is anybody that could be affected by your project, influence your project, or be affected by the end product, the result of your project, the deliverable. Okay? So stakeholders, not only people that are involved in the project work, not only the people that are involved in project decision making, but also those that might be quiet on the outside that become affected by the project work or the project result. So a stakeholder might have a specific request or need that they're asking the organization to do to accommodate. That specific request, that specific request might be to create, improve, or fix a project. That specific stakeholder request or need might be social requirement, or it might be something specific to them. Okay. And a project might also be created to implement or change business or technological strategies. Here we go right here. How about a project that we say, we've got to respond to implement a change to prepare and deliver this course online, right? Well, there's a project there, right? Because I was given that task, right, a few weeks ago, right, like 2 weeks ago. It has an end date because it was either I did it or I had to be ready by March 26th, right? Because that's the first meeting. If I couldn't be ready, the project would not have taken place, and this class would have been canceled. So the technological strategies would be, okay, what are we going to use? What platforms are going to be involved in supporting this class, and how can we, provide that to the stakeholders, which are all of you. I'm a stakeholder. You're all stakeholders. college administration is a stakeholder. Okay. So, like I say, every so often, I am going to um, stop for a moment and go back and check if any chat room messages have come in that I need to address. And I'm going to take that moment right now. And I see that Marvin, you're good. I see you in there. I don't see Andrew, so I'm going to assume that Andrews is not here. If you are here, so I'm going to write one last thing, Andrews Feliciano. If you are here, please email me. Otherwise, I will be Let me just leave that up there for a second, just as a shout out to Andrews Feliciano. Everybody else has been marked as present. So I know you're here. What I want to do is, while we're waiting on Andrews, if Andrews is out there, I want you all to give this some thought. Look at the reasons. I'm going to take this message off the screen in a moment. But think of these 4 reasons, and think about the current situation we're in for COVID-19. Okay? And through your experience, through your jobs, through your dealing with this situation, and maybe even outside of what you're doing personally, maybe what you see other companies doing. Let's come up with a couple of ideas, and we can use the chat room to collect some ideas on maybe some projects that may need to be initiated now to deal with the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic, either as it impacts the healthcare, the city, the state, the supply chain. We're hearing a lot about the supply chain in medical equipment, and affecting businesses that have to operate in a different fashion. So let's take about 10 minutes. I'm going to go offline for 10 minutes. Actually, what I'm going to do is get a sip of water. And you guys could start writing in the chat as you think of them. When I return, then we'll just discuss some of those and then move on. Okay, so I see a bunch of good ideas coming in. Yes, I think I'm going to just start from the top and go through. If you don't see me highlight yours, there's a couple of them that this seems to be, geniuses think alike. So, assembly of makeshift hospitals in temporary locations. Exactly, they're need need to prepare for the um, for the worst and have additional hospital beds to deal with what could be a large number that will exceed the capacity, right? Exceed the capacity of our current hospital situations. And where those temporary locations can be, I see a couple of good um, examples. Need more hospitals and ventilators, right? So need similar to what Maria had had added, plus the ventilators was those makeshift hospitals are going to need to have the equipment in there as well. Now here we get a little bit more specific to the Jacob Javits Center to make a makeshift hospital. So now we're taking those same ideas, and Nan is coming up with a very specific. I think this has been mentioned to go with the Jacob Javits Center and something somebody else had said later on, but some of the schools, right, to use some of the colleges' dorms as that have been vacated by the students to use the college dorms as as hospitals to deal with the overflow. But what baseball is saying, I don't know who this is. I've got an attendance sheet and I've got nobody named baseball, but we're also going to need the equipment. We're going to need the ventilators. We're also going to need resource, human resources. We're going to need healthcare professionals. We're going to need doctors, nurses. We're going to need maintenance people. We're going to need anybody that would normally be making a hospital run. We're going to need the technology set up and wired um, to handle the equipment and communications. So these makeshift hospitals, not like just put up a tent like like they did in the war in MASH, right? And that old show MASH. They just put up a tent. They could get people stitched up and back on their feet. Maybe we're looking at sophisticated equipment. We're looking at communications. We're looking at doing things that service the people and not just make them one step before the more. Creating more face masks or getting more medical supplies in general. So we have two things here. Tim is creating more face masks, right? Where can we manufacture or get them from? I mean, this is a worldwide pandemic, right? It's a worldwide crisis that we can't just look overseas and say, well, can we get them from overseas? But what I've heard was that China has been on a decline in their new cases. And I believe they have sent cases of supplies, face masks, etc., over to Italy because they say you need them more than we do at this time. We have an excess, and you're in short supply, and you're catching that next wave. Maybe Italy, Spain, and some of these other countries that are experiencing that wave will be flowing down the curve and have excess that can come over to us when we need it. And maybe as New York is on the front line, it seems, I think half the cases in the country are are isolated in New York, and specifically in the downstate area, New York metropolitan area. Maybe it's the same situation, that that supply chain can move, that when we're over the hump, so to speak, we could be helping out the next region or state or city that is going through it at a later time. So creating more face masks, getting more medical supplies, and improving the supply chain. Fire stations are available. Some have off-site helipads. So another suggestion or idea for setting up hospital space, patient care. Right? So now here's a redirection of resources, Nadine, right? Having more of the construction companies pause their office building, residential building, retail space, whatever business that they're in, so that they can lend a hand at getting these temporary hospitals built in time to satisfy the need. Sure. More drive-through drugstores, right? So now we're talking about projects. So each of these ideas, if you could just put it in your mind as, well, these are ideas, these are concepts. How do we turn these ideas into reality? That's what the project is. What are all the steps that are needed to take place? What are all the resources that are needed to be available? In this case, drive-through drugstores to make people less exposed. What's the effort there? Right? What's the effort there that if you have a drugstore, does it have the ability to do a drive up, or is it going to have to be, you know, that kind of curbside service, because maybe they don't have the traffic pattern to support drive-through, right? The curbside service, similar to what a lot of the restaurants are trying to do these days to stay in business and to you know, feed people. Yeah, companies are gonna have to start setting up employees to work remotely for longer periods of time, and you can see what's happening. So if any of you are working remotely, you might be at a loss on and getting some of your work done. It might be more difficult. It might be more challenging. It might be, you might be saying, "Oh, if I had this, or if I had that, you know, what is it going to take to be productive working remotely, as opposed to, well, just having the technology and getting on into a VPN and, you know, having the technology set up, but what else is needed in order to do that? You know, sometimes working from home can be less productive in terms of communication, in terms of being there. Okay, now I know who you are, baseball. I don't know either. I think you can go into Google and do it if you wanted to, but you don't have to do it on my account. Virtual medical examinations. Marie, another one. That's excellent, right? We have the technology. I mean, there are teledoc, right? I know with my insurance, I haven't used it, but I know I got a card for teledoc that if I, you know, had some type of you know, some type of ailment that's on a certain list of things that are supported by teledoc, I can call up and they have technology that they can that they could give me some type of at least treatment, or at least some type of temporary, until I could see a doctor. And you know, maybe this is a way that there would be a way of virtual medical examinations, virtual way of testing for the virus itself. I don't know. And yeah, providing special needs care for families with special need kids and seniors. And what's happening to all the social services in place that are not able to get out there when those special services are even needed at a greater extent for special needs kids, uh, disabilities, senior citizens, um, you know, talking about emotional and depression needs. It's that's the next shoe to drop is you know, uh, is isolation and is not good for everybody. And Dora, automakers including GM and Tesla taking steps to boost the output of making medical equipment, including potentially ventilators, right? So GM, Tesla, Chrysler, um, Hyundai, whoever, right? They make automobiles. They've got factories. They've got workers. They've got resources. Um, but yeah, how do you create? How do you retool the expertise to make ventilators? I mean, um, they're not in that business. They're not in that business, and had no intention of going into that business before the last few weeks. How do you turn on a dime and make that effective? Because this equipment is needed immediately. Um, maybe they have to rest on the backs of the people that are the experts in the ventilator manufacturing industry and say, okay, GM, I'm at your disposal, right? I'm at your disposal. We make cars. Um, we're not making ventilators. We're not in the medical equipment business, but we have capacity. What can we do to help you? Right? And that might be the way around it. So the companies that are in the business of ventilators can get a boost from these other uh, folks. And this is our last comment: is training employees to use SharePoint, Google Docs to work collaboratively remotely. It's something that we were talking about earlier. Exactly that. You know, loss of productivity. Maybe people are working harder. Maybe it's a cause of a lot of frustration. Right? I don't know if any of you are working from home now. You may be, um, you know, frustrated in an inability to get work done, working longer hours even though you're home. I know I have a friend of mine that told me that that's his situation. That he's working. He's working about another hour and a half to 2 hours a day, based on the work taking longer to do because he doesn't have everything at his disposal. Communication is more difficult. Okay, so one last one is distilleries starting to mix hand sanitizer because they weren't selling alcohol. Yeah, exactly. So that's another project. So we have a lot of projects. So those are a lot of ideas. And what we might do is follow on with that and use that as maybe one of these ideas as a little case study as time goes on. But those are why projects can be initiated. There you go. So if you're typing anything in, I'm not going to see it. I'm kind of going to move on to some more slides. So again, through that all, those are great ideas. There's a lot of really good ideas, and a lot of ideas that I've seen that I've heard before, and they're put into motion. A couple of ideas that I wasn't familiar with and might not be put into motion, and maybe things that you have in your head that are other ideas. But that's conceptual, right? The role of the project manager is to lead the team responsible for achieving the objectives. Right? It's to get it done. The project manager isn't there to think of these ideas. Now, we just did because we're all smart people. We have ideas. We're going through this trying time. We know our own experience, and we can think of ideas. But that you're wearing a different hat. You're not wearing the project management hat when you conceptualize. Okay, you're wearing the project management hat when that objective has been defined, when that objective has been approved, authorized, funded, okay? And it's something that the organization wants to get done and says, okay, now how can we take this idea and have it materialize? Not always easy, right? Not always easy. How many of you would just sit back on something that you might have been asked to do and saying, oh, they don't understand all that's involved in doing it. Well, from a conceptual standpoint, they really don't have to. That's not their job, right? Their job is to think of these great ideas and then to figure out how it could be done, if it could get done, what might be the most expedient way of getting it done, and delivering the project objectives. That's the role of the project manager. And not only the role of the project manager to come up with all of those tactics and schedules and approaches and whatnot, but to lead the team responsible for achieving the project objectives. Leading the team, leadership role, right? Not to do, not to build. Okay? There's a big difference. There's a big difference. The role of the project manager is to accomplish the work through the efforts of the project team. Okay? Accomplish the work through the efforts of the project team, not by doing the work themselves. So I use this little cartoon up here, and we've got this conductor, right? And he's got this orchestra, all these musicians. Some of them are asleep, some of them are playing cards, some of them are playing their instruments. You know, some of them look like they're having a little trouble here. This guy looks like he's going a little cross-eyed playing that clarinet or whatever that might be. But in any event, all of these musicians make up the project team. They're all the experts in their particular instrument. It's not expected that the trombone player up in the right-hand corner knows how to play the violin, and it's not expected that the guy over here, I don't know what that is, an oboe? Is that an oboe? This guy has a saxophone, right? They're not expected to know how to play this clarinet, right? They're subject matter experts in their own field, in their own area. Okay? And that's what the conductor is there for. The conductor brings out the best in all of them to make the music sound right, sound organized, sound connected, sound together. That everybody knows when they're supposed to come in and do their solo, perhaps. And if they have to move faster or slower or accent something, he'll give them signals. But the conductor doesn't necessarily have to be able to play any of these instruments. In fact, this conductor might not even know how to tune a violin. Might be a pianist, might be a vocalist, might be a composer that doesn't really play many instruments other than maybe electronic composition. Might be a saxophone player, but in the role of the project manager, he's not playing the saxophone. He's conducting. Why? Because the more time you're spending doing the work, the less focus you have on the group as a whole. So in order for the conductor to do his job in leading the team, has to remove himself from doing the actual work to promote organization, to promote communication, to resolve issues, to escalate where appropriate. Okay? So the conductor in this picture is your project manager. PMI, Project Management Institute, the publisher of that book, the certifying body for the CAPM and the PMP certifications, goes on to say that there are 3 areas, and they call it the talent triangle, that a project manager can continue to develop themselves. Technical project management is just that, not technology. Technical project management is everything we're going to be doing in this class. The methodology, the structure, the organization of project management, the professional project management. On top of that, leadership. Leadership is one of those things that you have to build through experience. Some people are gifted leaders. Other people have to work on it a little bit more than others. Some people are comfortable in a leadership role, others might not be. But to succeed in a project management role, that leadership quality has to be developed to make you a better leader, because that's what the team is going to be looking for. The team is just going to be begging you to be led. They want direction. They want support. The team is going to want motivation. The team is going to require organization and communication, and that they feel that there's a credibility in that leadership. And the third is strategic and business management. And what strategic and business management really is industry specific, right? Industry specific knowledge. If you're in the construction trades and you're managing projects in the construction trades, you should work on building those skills and that knowledge of the construction industry. If you're in the technology industry, same thing. You should be looking to build your knowledge base in terms of technology, integration, etc. If you're in healthcare, if you're in supply chain, if you're in manufacturing, if you're in event planning, right? If you're in advertising, that third leg, technical project management, leadership, and that industry knowledge, all together forms a strength of a triangle that equals the strength of a project manager. I'm going to just give you a minute or two to read through these check marks. I'm going to go check back and see if there are any comments, or if you have any comments as you're reading these. Okay. I don't see any questions, so I'm going to take that as everything is loud and clear. This is pretty basic stuff, but I don't want to leave anybody behind on this overview stuff, and just to get a good handle on things. Okay, so if you have any questions, I will check back in a couple of minutes. But I'm going to move on at this point. So we talked about the development of the project manager. Now let's look at the responsibilities of the project manager. Responsibilities of the project manager kind of goes hand in hand with that role of the conductor, the orchestra conductor, or the role of the generalist, we call it, to address stakeholder needs, concerns, and expectations. Very carefully look at those three words: needs, concerns, and expectations. Needs are going to be requests. Those are going to be things that the stakeholder wants to see included within the scope of the project, or maybe um, a certain quality level on how the work is done and the deliverables are built. Concerns that points me in the direction of risks. What does the stakeholder have concerns about, thinking that there may be a possibility that it doesn't go as planned, or there's uncertainty? And expectations. Expectations. Um, that really sets the bar at what, you know, where where the stakeholder may um, expect a certain level of performance, or a certain level of quality, or a certain level of communication from you, or a certain level of responsiveness. Right? So addressing the stakeholder needs, concerns, and expectations does not mean necessarily meeting or providing for the needs, concerns, and expectations of the stakeholders. You might not be able to do it. There may be times when the stakeholders' expectations are not in sync with the scope of the project, not in sync with the budget that's been given, not in sync with the skill level of the resources and employees that are um, working on the particular project. Might not be within a lot of the parameters. Those expectations might be over expectations. So how do we address that? You got to address it directly, right? So addressing the stakeholder needs might be saying, well, we might not be able to meet those expectations, or those expectations will likely not be met, or those expectations will cost more money than we were provided in our budget to meet, and therefore cannot be entertained. Okay. Sometimes they will be, right? I don't want to turn it into a negative, but addressing the stakeholder needs could be a yes or no response based on the objectives of the project, and based on the entire budget, schedule, and all of the project aspects. So the responsibility of the project manager is to balance the project constraints. And we talk about the triple constraint, right? Scope, schedule, and cost. But there are others. But the triangle that we have here, right, says that we have cost, which equals resources, because resources cost money, whether it's human resources or equipment or materials, tangible resources, human resources, they cost money, right? We constrained by schedule, right? If this class starts on 3/26, it does me no good if a particular piece of technology wouldn't be available to me until May 1st, right? That's outside of the constraint of the objective of this class as a project. And the good, we talk about scope, and closely tied to scope is quality, right? Scope is what is it that you're going to do, and quality is, how good are you going to do it, or to what standard are you going to achieve it. So we talk about cost, schedule, and scope in terms of it could be cheap, fast, and good, but you can't have all of them, right? You can't say something is going to be cheap, fast, and good. Usually we say we pick two. You could have it cheap and fast, but it's not going to be very good. You could have it cheap and good, but you're not going to get it very fast. You could have it fast and good, but it's not going to come to you cheap, right? You're going to pay for that. So looking at the triple constraints, and balancing them and using it to address the stakeholder needs, concerns, and expectations. That um, that along with communication, which we'll talk about in a few weeks, is the primary responsibilities of the project manager. We talked about who stakeholders are. I covered that earlier, so I'm just going to give you a minute or so to read through these 3 bullets on your own. And I was looking at taking a break right about now. It's about 90 minutes into the class, probably right around the halfway point for this evening. So we're going to go through another slide or two, and then we're going to take a little break. Projects, programs, and portfolios. It's really a hierarchy. We talked a lot about what a project is. A program is a group of related projects managed in a coordinated way. Right? They could benefit. They could benefit if there's some oversight between several related projects. Related projects might mean if we have outdoor landscaping project, right? Let's say we have one project that's in place to plant ornamental bushes, do a whole survey and plan for campus beautification. Nassau Community College is going to do a campus beautification project. Get some new plantings in, maybe some walkways, maybe some ornamental gardens. And at the same time, there's another project, outdoor project, to repave the parking lots. Right? Nassau Community College has several large parking lots and roads in between them. There may be enough in common with those two between different vendors, between different contractors, and also in timing, right? To see that that both of these projects are handled in a strategic way, so that they're timed for less impact on the operation of the college, to the students, to the faculty, etc. So a program would be a group of related projects. The related projects would not be, those outdoor projects, those landscaping and parking lot projects, and maybe there might be some system upgrade take place. Those would not be related. There's not going to be any synergy of benefits between the two of those. So those would not be included in the same program. Okay? Those would be just 2 separate projects that are unrelated, that might be occurring at the same time. A portfolio is a collection of projects and programs. So it could be related projects and maybe unrelated projects, but also operations work, right? So in our case of having the program of the outdoor beautification project and the outdoor parking lot project, the operations might be, well, when those projects are done, ongoing maintenance to clean, to fertilize the plants, to remove weeds, right? To clean the parking lot, street sweeper type of thing, right? So repair cracks, and potholes, etc., right? That would be on related operations work. So a portfolio would include the projects, the programs, and the related operations. A PMO is a project management organization. Some companies use them, some companies do not. Um, if they're in effect, they really come in three different flavors. A supporting PMO, right, is where you're going to have project management excellence scattered throughout the organization, but they can come together to share templates, best practices, training opportunities, lessons learned, and have a supportive environment where project managers can learn from others who may have more experience, who may have done something recently that they have to do next. Um, and it's a supporting role, meaning it's there to support. The project manager can choose to accept that training, to accept that best practice, to accept that template, to accept those lessons learned from the supporting PMO, or they could say, that really isn't for me. I'm going to go about it a different way. And there's no oversight in terms of mandating that that support is used. That's as opposed to a controlling PMO, where the controlling PMO requires conformance to project governance frameworks. Okay, in the terms of the controlling PMO, the project manager must conform to what the PMO guidelines would be. Okay, they might be audited, right, and that means that the organization has authorized the PMO to control project management as a whole for the entire organization. In the controlling PMO, the project managers still might be spread out across the organization and report into different silos. The project manager might report to marketing, and another project manager might report into a technology department, an IT group, an engineering group. Another project manager might report into a financial division, right? They report into the VPs or the directors of those various areas, but they still must conform by a standard set up company-wide. The directing project management office takes control of the projects by directly managing the project managers. That means that the project managers will report into the director, the vice president, the officer of the project management office. All of the project managers within the organization will be centralized in a reporting structure to the same um, head, okay, as opposed to here where it might be spread out and still abiding by the same rules. Okay, supporting, controlling, and directing. I go into this because these, again, back to our tests, back to our CAPM or PMP exams that you might be following this class on with to certify. They ask about PMO. They'll expect that you know the difference between a supporting, a controlling, and a directing PMO, and be able to identify them. I like to call it like out of a police lineup, right? The tests are structured multiple choice. They might give you a definition or a scenario where you have to identify it as, A, supporting, B, controlling, C, directing. Choose one. Okay? So I'm giving you this almost as a reminder that this is something that you want to make sure that you understand. Two more slides and we're going to take our break. So bear with me. Break is going to have a little work for you too. Okay, break is going to have a little work for you too. Project environment. Enterprise environmental factors. They're conditions that are not within control of the project team that can influence or constrain the project. Therefore, EEFs, enterprise environmental factors, our input, it says most, our input to all planning processes. I should change this slide to say all planning processes. Okay. So what is an enterprise environmental factor? Well, they could be internal or external, right? Factors that are not within the control of the project team can be internal to the organization, like the culture of the organization, the organizational structure, the code of conduct, the geographic location, right? Where your company is located. Your project is not going to change that, right? Or the infrastructure, likely the infrastructure and the technology. You're going to have to work within the parameters that set forth, unless the project is to replace that technology. And the core competencies. If you're in, a construction company, you might not have the competencies in perhaps IT, right? You might have to. That might be a constraint within your planning process. Right? External factors could be market conditions. Is there a market for the product? Right? You may not have that within your control within the project team. The political climate, right? Things that might be at unrest, okay, might make for change within your planning process. Business regulations, right? You might be going down, a certain project in flight, and you might have to replan because some type of tax law change or some type of response to COVID-19 changes your business regulations for how you conduct your business. Industry standards, right? It might not be something that's actually mandated by the government, but you're not going to have a viable market if you don't at least keep up with industry standards. You're going to look, you don't look like you're behind the times, and you're not going to be marketable. Other external currency exchange rates, general working conditions, etc. The weather. If you're doing outdoor work, or if you're, doing work in the Northeast in the wintertime, you have to consider that there could be closures, and weather conditions that prohibit people from getting to work. So these are all factors that you need to consider in planning your project. We also have another piece that influences our planning processes, right? And again, the slide says most, but I think we could replace that. You can cross that out if you printed these out and you're working off paper. You can replace it. I might get to it, I might not. So most with all planning processes. Organizational process assets are policies, knowledge, and artifacts that an organization has. That's why they're assets. What are assets? What are your assets? Assets are things that you own that have value. Okay? So process assets would be policies, knowledge, artifacts, a knowledge database, lessons learned from prior projects, templates, right? So you can read through some of these reporting formats so it's easy to communicate. Spreadsheets, so you don't have to create a spreadsheet each time. Maybe somebody has a budgeting spreadsheet that you can use and just retool for your project. That would be an organizational process asset. It's an asset. It has value, and you can use it in your project. So right here, enterprise environmental. What I'm going to do is we're going to take a break. Well, let me go back to my other screen. Good. So I'm going to see that we have some comments. I know that's a few minutes ago. Yanuchka, I hope I'm not terribly messing up your name or pronunciation. But Yanuchka, when you get a chance, can you slide back to the previous one? Stakeholders, please. I think I missed something just for a second. So Nadine is correct. The slides are in the Google Drive. You can go to the shared drive folder, and you can see them. So if you want, you could even kind of refer back to them either now or afterwards. And they're all out there. The entire course, all of the slides for the full 7 weeks are all out there. So you're set for 7 weeks. What I'm going to leave this with you, Yanuchka. If you still need me to go back, I will, but let me finish what I'm doing now, and then I'll get to you in a moment. We're going to take a 15-minute break. At 7:48, we'll be back just after 8 o'clock. Let's say 8:05 to round things out. We'll be back at 8:05. What I want you to do between now and 8:05 is take your break, but also think about our projects that we were calling for earlier. Think back about a project that would, let's be a little specific, that we're going to repurpose the Javits Center as a temporary hospital space to deal with the overflow capacity for the COVID-19 virus. Okay. Think about what types of organizational process assets might be at your disposal for the project, and think about what enterprise environmental factors you would need to consider. Right? You would need to consider in planning that project, just to give it a little, mindfulness into putting some of these things to light. So at 7:49, we'll be back at 8 o'clock, and then we can discuss that. Just as before, if you want, you can start typing them in, and when I come back, we'll review them as a group. 8:05. Okay. Okay, I'm back and just looking through things just to give you an idea of where we are with the course, where we are with tonight's class specifically. Got at 8:05 now. We should be wrapping things up around 9 o'clock. So I don't think we're not gonna go until 9:30. Um, I am gonna give you a little bit of an assignment to do between now and next week. But in addition to reading, it's only a small, like, couple of review questions, and we'll go over that next week. But we should be able to get through the rest of the material. I'd say within an hour or so. So I just look where I dropped off. Okay, so we were talking about enterprise environmental factors, operational process assets. Okay. So here, Amber, floor plans. That's an asset, right? Knowing the room capacities, the outlets for energy use, etc. Having those floor plans at your disposal, right, means that you don't have to start measuring. You might have to double check your work before you make orders or anything, but you have floor plans. You can go and do a lot of your planning from that asset that's at your disposal for planning purposes. Excellent use of an operational process asset or an organizational process asset. I'm sorry. Electric and other utility services, fire laws. Yeah. So I'm not sure what that is. Electric and other utilities and services. Yeah, things that might be at your disposal. I guess that could be an asset, right? If there are services that are already around. And fire laws to safely set up the hospital rooms. That would be an enterprise environmental factor, right? You need to consider the factor of fire laws, other types of building code, other types of healthcare governance to set up these hospital rooms, in quotes, as you put it, Janet, in these temporary spaces. So it's not that we could just roll a bed into a room and call it a hospital. Access control, verifying qualified personnel, delegating tasks and assignments. So I'll look at that, and those look like tasks. Okay, so that looks like project work. We didn't, this is our first meeting, and we didn't get too deep into the various steps and aspects and knowledge areas of a project. But verifying qualified personnel, right? That is going to be a task. With as an activity within the project itself to staff resources for this hospital is going to be something that has to be scheduled, that has to be planned, not necessarily at your disposal. But what might be there is any documentation or any standards that need to be upheld to distinguish personnel to be used in the interviewing process. Could be delegating tasks and assignment. Again, that's part of the project work. That's not what I would call an asset or a factor. COVID-19, just the situation is holding up schedules right now. We are losing men on site because they stay home and they are sick. Well, you know what, Nadine? That I would say is an enterprise environmental factor, but even more so than that, it's a risk. So when we start talking about risk management, that's going to be a risk, and we're going to say, well, can we? Is there an uncertainty that we can get our work done as scheduled because we may not have the resources available as we need them on site because of the pandemic? Okay, it's more of a risk. It is a factor in that just the situation, like the weather, needs to be considered in the planning. But to the extent that it's going to affect your work, it's also a risk. So I'll have to agree that it's an enterprise environmental factor. It's an external one, but it's closely tied to risk management. Yeah. So you create an Excel template. It's suited a specific need, but it's more general than that. Other projects can retool this Excel template or use it as is or retool it for their needs. And it provides a starting point or someplace that could save a lot of time, could save a lot of effort, and can improve the quality of their project. So yes, definitely that's an OPA. Darit, okay. Javits Center will need to have a reduction of ambient noise. Will need proper air quality. Okay, so I'm gonna put that back with what Leslie had said earlier. These look like tasks. These look like activities. So we're going to say, okay, the Javits Center needs to have a reduction in ambient noise. So that what are we going to do? We're going to have to build some soundproofing, some type of muffling sounds, carpeting, wall hangings, whatever, or soundproofing to that effect. Proper air quality. Okay, that's going to be a task, right? We're going to have to bring in quality air HVAC people. Going to have to clean the air, install insulation, energy efficient systems, whatever those are. This is the planning process that's going to lead to activities and lead to um, work packages that need to be part of the project itself, more than calling them a factor. Okay. Exactly. So then I think this is what Dorit might have been looking at, and you're just wording this a lot better and more directly um, as an enterprise environmental factor. That there are outside external departments of health, joint commissions, these outside governing agencies that have standards, regulations, and need to be complied with. So that will factor into your planning process for how you would deliver the air quality, for how you would insulate, and to what levels um, of ambient noise would be acceptable, to what levels that air quality needs to be tested to. So I think between the two of you, you're covering the same base. But what you're saying here, Nan, um, pointing to the Department of Health and Joint Commissions as those governing agencies really highlights the need for the external environmental factor. Same thing here, ADA requirements, another external uh, environmental factor. Would need floor drawings to show the design of rooms, right? Okay, so that's work task. Okay, if we have um, if we have the current state, that would be somebody said that earlier. If we had the current floor plans and the current schematics for where the electric is and where the technology is and where um, the machine rooms are and etc. Um, but needing to draw new drawings to show the design of the rooms where what you're going to build out, that would be an activity. That would be something that would have to take place as part of your project. And setting up the spreadsheet for easy communication between the owner, the architect, and the construction manager. So since you're saying set up a submittal spreadsheet, that means it doesn't exist. Okay, that would not be an asset. But if you had one and you said we would use this existing spreadsheet and communication process that we've used before, and the owner, the architect, and construction manager are all used to using it and communicating in that fashion, then that would be an asset. Right here, you're building the asset. That would be part of your project. I hope I hope you're understanding the subtle difference between the two. The asset is something that already exists versus setting up, which is something that you're going to have to build and consider as part of your project. And again, this kind of falls in line with that you're doing things specifically for the project. That would be project activities. That would be what we call deliverables and work packages, which we'll get to in the next couple of weeks, what those definitions mean. But they will be a result of your project, not something that will be coming as an input to your project. Okay, that could be an assumption. So you need to get using personnel who are already familiar with the site and familiar with um, the floor plans, right? That might be considered an assumption that that's who we're going to use, right? Do we know that these people are accessible? Do we know that they exist? Do we know that they're available? Do we know that we can afford them? Do we know that they can be moved on site if necessary, or the travel restrictions against them coming into New York for this purpose? So there's some questions to be answered. So I wouldn't say that that's a factor. I would say that that would be a preference. It could be an assumption that we're going to use personnel that are already familiar. But I wouldn't say that it's an environmental factor. Okay. So I hope you get that. And if you don't get the subtle differences yet, if you're still a little bit, we're going to go through some more slides. We're going to get to next week, going through project charter and some other stuff. Some of this stuff will clarify for you. And this might be a good place to just make note of. If you don't understand environmental factors and operation, I'm sorry, I keep saying operation, but organizational process assets, if you have some confusion, this might be a good place to highlight and read up in the book. I think there's a couple of paragraphs on each that you might be able to use their wording and their examples and their phrasing, and combined with what I'm teaching you tonight, you might get a better picture of it. If there's still question on it next week, certainly we can move towards that. But what I want to do now is go back to our slide package and move ahead to some of the remaining slides and the remaining concepts for tonight. Project life cycle. The project life cycle goes part and parcel with the idea that a project has a definite beginning and an end. It has a life, right? People are born, people die. The thing about a project is we kind of predict that time, right? We work towards predicting it. But human life, well, it's not as easily predictable. But we call it a life cycle because it's a beginning to an end. And that life cycle will consist of a series of phases, right? What's a phase but a logically related activities that result in the completion of one or more deliverables? So in this makeshift hospital, we might have a phase that's an architecture phase, right? That planning out and doing designs for what this transformation is going to look like and putting it down on paper, right? And addressing the needs that were brought up in our chat conversation, right? But not doing work yet. The deliverable of that phase would be architectural diagrams, would be blueprints, would be building plans that could be reviewed. They could be inspected. Okay, that would be a deliverable. The deliverable of that phase is a tangible, verifiable work product. A deliverable doesn't have to be the end product. It's not necessarily the hospital or not a hospital room, right? It could be a deliverable being plans, being architecture, okay? It could be inspected. It could go through what we call a phase gate. Phase gate is a milestone, okay? It's a milestone. And that means that the deliverable can be inspected to see that it's acceptable to move on to the next phase. That's why it's a phase gate. The gate swings, right? It swings open or it could stay closed. If the architectural plans are not approved as is, they might have to be reworked before you can move on to the next phase, right? The phase gate is also a place where consideration might be to terminate the project if it's either viewed as being not feasible, uh, additional costs, or any other issues that might be insurmountable. It might be a time to say, well, either terminate or suspend or postpone a project on the account of certain conditions. Okay, so the phase gate is an opportunity to inspect the deliverable, right, and determine if you are to move on to the next phase. So the next phase might be something in ordering supplies. It might be, staffing and resourcing the project. So going out and actually getting the contractors, getting the people that are going to do the work, negotiating what their rates are going to be, right? They're not going to be able to bid on the job until you got a building plan, right? So you can't move on to that phase until your design phase is approved, and then you can make your orders, and then that could be approved, and then move on to the next phase, which might be some form of construction and actually building. I'm going to talk about this a little now, and then we'll talk about it again sporadically throughout the course, probably when we talk about schedule and at the end of the class as a review. There are two different methodologies or types of project life cycles. Basically, one's called predictive and the other's adaptive. Okay, we'll talk about predictive first. Predictive is traditional project management. Predictive is plan driven. It means that we're going to plan all the work up front. We're going to have a plan that takes us from beginning to end. We're going to, dot the I's, cross the T's, put everything in place so that then we can manage the work according to what we've planned. Naturally, we could respond to any deviations. We could respond to conditions. We can adjust and evolve, but we go through a full planning process up front that'll take us from beginning to end. Okay. Rolling wave planning means that near-term activities that are going to be done sooner will be planned in more detail than activities that are to be done at a later date, right? We still plan them to a certain extent that we know we have to do them. We know that there's going to be testing and inspections and other things but we don't know exactly what that's going to mean. So we can put a placeholder out there and get to it at a later date and flesh out all the details at a later date. But it's still a plan-driven approach. Okay, that is primarily what we're going to cover in this class. We're going to primarily cover plan-driven, predictive, what I call traditional project management, where you plan the work and work the plan. Okay. Adaptive, also known as agile, is a change-driven methodology. Okay, where you only plan a small amount of work to be done and say, all that other stuff that we're going to do next month, We'll get to it then. We'll worry about it then. Let's get this done now, and then we'll see what's important to do next. We're not going to plan things out A, B, C, D, finish. We're going to plan things out A and do A, and everything else from B to C to D, right, will be put in what we call a backlog, right? Unplanned work. It's been defined, it's been requested, it's part of our scope, but it's in a backlog. A backlog, what's a backlog? It's stuff that hasn't been done. If you have a to-do list, right, you got a backlog, okay? This keeps you agile, it keeps you nimble, because you're not investing in a plan that's going to carry, 6, 9, 12 months into the future. You're going to go 1 month or less. Do that work and then say, okay, what are we going to do next? And that is to remain responsive to changing environment when scope and requirements are difficult to define in advance. It works great for things like software, okay? When there aren't tangible deliverables. If you're doing a building project, very difficult to be agile. If you're doing this Javits Center retooling, it's very difficult to be agile. You could do certain aspects of your project, and you might move into something of a hybrid situation where parts of your project could be done agile, but the lion's share is going to be predictive in any type of construction, manufacturing, or what I call hard product development. Because you have dependencies. You have dependencies that are tangible, hard, built on one another, as opposed to software that is just electrons, right? If you build software and you have to undo something and redo something, it might be labor intensive, but it's code. It's, like I said, it's electrons. It's not like investing in hard material and building walls only to take those walls down and move them somewhere else. Tremendous amount of waste. So you don't want to be too change driven when it comes to that type of project management that involves construction, manufacturing, etc. Predictive is going to be what's used in that situation. For the purpose of this class, we're going to work in a predictive mode, but we're also going to refer to agile just because it's prevalent in certain industries. It's prevalent in supply chain. It's prevalent in Amazon likes to be agile, so they could respond very quickly in their logistics. Agile is very prominent. Actually, it came from the software development and technology integration areas. So it is something that you should know. It's definitely on the certification tests, so you will have to know some of the terminology that we will get to in this class. But for all intents and purposes, our focus is going to be more predictive, and that's the way PMBOK is really structured, and that's what the way methodology is really leans towards. So you can just see here that in a predictive plan-driven, sometimes known as a waterfall life cycle, you go through your phases, right, to come up with an end target, right? You come up with your end target. Where in a change-driven, you go through these little mini cycles and come up with a mini increment, right? That's used here, that's used there, and it builds, it builds. At the end, you have the same thing. You may have the same thing, but you may not if requirements, conditions change over the course of the project. I'm just going to go back and see if I lost anybody along the way. If there's any questions on life cycles, predictive versus adaptive, now might be the time that you ask it before we move on to the next subject. Okay, I don't see anything. I must be doing a good job. You have a good teacher. Or are you all asleep? Did I lose you all? Uncertainty. Uncertainty is risk, right? Because if it was certain, it would just be work. So when we talk about risk, we're talking about uncertainties. And generally speaking, risk and uncertainty is highest at the project start and decreases over the life of the project. Why? Because as work gets done, as the team, right, works together, you get to know each other's work habits. The team works more cohesively, collaboratively. The work gets done. Things that we didn't know either could be done or how long they would take start to become done, and we have a better picture on what that looks like. Now, the thing to recognize about uncertainty and risk that we will cover in, I think, week 4 or 5 or 6, in more detail, project risk management, is that risk and uncertainty doesn't mean that your problems go away as the project goes on. Risk and uncertainty means that you are becoming more and more certain as the project goes on. And at this point here, you might be certain of total failure. Okay? It's not always a good news story. It just means that uncertainty becomes more certain and more clear. And we have a better picture on what things are going to take, if there's problems, if we're going to meet our dates, if we're going to stay within budget, as those risks and uncertainty become more clear. At the same time, as the project life cycle moves along, the cost of changes generally increases. Why? The same reason. Things get done, a change might impact more and more of the project. Okay? Especially if you have to scrap and redo at a certain point, that could be very costly. Okay? And maybe at another point, that changes would be so cost prohibitive that they can't be made. If they were thought of initially, it might have been an easy change when the designs were on paper rather than when the deliverables are almost fully formed. Okay? So we talked about phases, and implied when we talked about phases was that the phases for a project are going to be based on the work, the deliverables, and the scope of a particular project. Meaning, you're going to have different phases for a construction project than you would for an IT project. Right? There's just different protocols, different things that need to be done, different steps that your phases need to suit the project. Right? So if we're building this makeshift hospital, we're going to have different phases for readiness at the Javits Center than we would if we were developing, a new app for a phone. If we were doing an event planning, right? If we were doing an advertising campaign, you're gonna have different steps, different phases, different points of inspection and approval with a customer, with a sponsor, with a project team, right? But all through that differentiation, all projects will go through what we call the 5 project management process groups. These are standardized. These 5 process groups are standardized for any project. Initiating, define and authorize a new project or phase. Any project, whether it's construction, logistics, technology, healthcare, you're going to have initiating phase where that new project is going to be conceived, authorized, funded, right? And assigned to a project manager. You're going to have planning, any type of project, to define the course of action to achieve the objectives. There's going to be planning. Now might be planning different things for different project types, just as we were talking a little bit in our Javits Center remodeling example, right? There are going to be different things to plan and different things to consider in the planning, right? The EEFs and the OPAs, you're going to have different things to consider in your planning, but every project is going to have planning. Sometimes planning is large, time-consuming, and formalized. Sometimes planning is very informal and quick because it's very apparent as what needs to be done and who's going to do it. Right? So the phases must exist in every project, but they can be emphasized, greater, and lesser, specifically on what project you're doing. Every project is going to have an executing phase where the work is completed, where you do the work that was planned to satisfy the project requirements. You're going to have monitoring and controlling process group, where the work that was done is compared to what was planned, to see if there's a variance, to see if there's any discrepancy between what was done and what was planned, to identify the need for corrective and preventative action, right? So if we are not executing according to the plan, why and what can we do differently going forward? And you may need to initiate corresponding changes, right? Because if you're executing not to the plan, maybe the plan needs to be changed because that's what needs to be done is what's actually happening. And you might have to go back and adjust your plans. Or you could say, no, what is planned needs to happen, and you have to scrap and redo what was done, right? But in any case, monitoring and controlling will be done on every project. And closing, the formal completion of the project or phase. Closing is going to exist on every project because every project is going to have a definitive beginning and end. It's going to have a beginning where you initiate, and it's going to have an end when you close. If it doesn't close, it's not a project. It's ongoing work, it's operations. I like to visualize those process groups as gears. Because once you initiate, right, you start planning, right, and then you begin executing. You execute what's been planned, and then as you execute, you monitor and control. When you monitor and control, you're looking at the variances, you're looking at the differences, you're looking at any discrepancies, you're looking at changes, you're looking at what may need to be replanned and re-executed. And it's going to go around this loop throughout the life cycle of your project until you're done. When you're done, you close the project. Okay? What might be closing? Well, finalizing the project, right? Finalizing the project, getting all of your maybe contracts closed, getting the final approvals, right? Getting the maintenance team, transitioning from a project work to operations, right? Handing over documentation of what was built so that it can be maintained, right? Because what happens to the project manager? What happens to the project team when the project is over? They leave. You get reassigned. You go to another project. you leave the operations group to manage that site, that deliverable, based on what you handed over. Okay. Would you use the process group for phases? I'm not sure I understand the question, but my first response would be no, because they're two different things. Again, the phases, you could say you have a planning phase, but the planning process group is ongoing throughout the project. Right? You could say that you have a planning phase where you're going to define the requirements, right, and have the requirements approved. That's phase. Right? But later on, as a result of monitoring and controlling, you have to re-enter that planning process group in order to make your adjustments and get the work replanned so that it can be executed. Okay, so while you may have things that overlap, you want to look at them. You want to look at them a little separately in terms of the cycle, right, versus the phase that you're done and then you move on. Right, a phase has like a project would have a definitive beginning and end. Okay, each phase would have a definitive beginning and end. So you would begin the requirements phase, it would end. You would begin the construction phase, and it would end. But you would begin an inspection phase, and it would end. Okay, but these process groups are ongoing until you close. Okay, I hope that helps a little bit. Organization. If I have to build this building first and then this building, but as a whole, it's one project. Yes, yes. So Nadine, I think I'm trying to read between the lines of the words that you wrote, right? But yes, you can have a multi-phase project that could be either serial, right? That you do one project, then another project, but you may have um, overlapping phases, right? You might be planning the second building while you're in construction on the first. Okay, so yes, I think you understand this pretty good. Would you use a process group for each phase? Use a process. So I'm going to just go back to my other screen. So would you use what I would say is almost the reverse. Each phase is going to have the process groups inherently within. So in the case that you're saying, Nadine, that you have multiple buildings, right? Let's say you have a series of buildings that are let's say one of the things I heard in response that I think was brought up here was using the SUNY campuses and the dormitories in the SUNY schools for extra beds in hospitals, right? And we may say, okay, you can do maybe the Stony Brook first, right? And then maybe do Purchase in Westchester second. Right? They might be overlapping. They might be serially. Right? You're going to initiate the phase of Stony Brook. You're going to plan Stony Brook. You're going to execute Stony Brook. You're going to monitor and control Stony Brook, and you're going to close Stony Brook when it's made available to patients, either serially afterwards or concurrently with other project teams. You might have purchase college, right? Initiating purchase, initiating planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, working through the details, getting purchase university, and then to closing, right? You might have a third. I don't know what's another state college. Isn't there Wagner in is that one in Staten Island? Initiating. So you'd have your third location that you would initiate. You would plan for that location. Now, there might be a lot in common. Your planning might have a lot in common from one location to another. You can use it. You can leverage that. But there also might be things that are unique. The floor plans, the building codes might be different for the different municipalities. Unions, right? There's one that's an external factor and an enterprise environmental factor, right? Union labor, considerations for that. So I hope that's helping, right? That you can have for each phase, you would have all of the process groups within each phase, not the other way around, right? You wouldn't have each phase being a process group. It works the other way around, that the process groups will be included within each phase. Yeah. So let's say the Javits Center or the SUNY colleges, any type of repurposing for hospital space, you would initiate, right? You'd start the project. This is the objective. You say, okay, this is, the goal. You have so many hospital beds at the Javits Center. You'd have a budget, right? At least an estimate for a budget that's being provided, right? You'd have a time frame. When is it needed by? Right? And that's a request, right? It's not confirmed. You don't know if you can do it in that amount of time. You don't know if you can do it for that amount of money. But that goes into your planning. That's a start. It's been initiated. You have your marching orders, and the project manager has been authorized to lead the project. You go into your planning. Now you do all your due diligence. And this is what we're going to be doing over the course of 7 weeks. So I'm not going to go into great detail there, but that's where you plan. That's where you plan all of the work that needs to be done. You plan what quality standards need to be adhered to. You plan what resources need to be on site at particular points in time. Okay? Then when it's executed, you monitor and control it. When it's done, when it's in progress, monitoring and controlling to see that it's done, and then you close. Okay? So I think, Marvin, I think you get that. Nadine, I hope that you get that. You seem to be on the right track with it. Amber, same thing. As I move on, just let me know if there's anything through the chat. If there's still something that you're confused on and we need to spend a few more minutes on it, we can do that. I'm just going to go to my next screen, which is the last screen of tonight. So this is how we're going to end things. The way the remaining 6 weeks are planned out, we're going to go through different aspects of the process. Next week, we're going to do integration and scope management. Integration is how the project ties together. Scope management tells us what we're going to do, right? Scope answers the question what. It doesn't get into when. It doesn't get into who. It doesn't get into how much is it going to cost, right? That we're going to cover in schedule. Will tell you when. Cost will tell you how much. Quality will tell you how good, right? Resource will tell you who. Communication is going to be, well, how are all the pieces going to be known to the project team? How is project information going to be disseminated? How are project requests going to be received? Two-way communication throughout the project. Risk, we already talked a little bit about that being uncertainties. How are we going to manage risk elements? Right? And risks can be positive or negative. Risks can be threats. but they could also be opportunities. And we'll look at that. Procurement, well, if you're spending money, you might be and spending that money to a third party or an outside vendor, contractor. You're going to have contracts. Procurement is going to get into different types of contracts and how to plan for work that is being done outside of the project team. And stakeholder management. How do we keep our stakeholders informed, and how do we keep them engaged for decision making? That'll be our last chapter. So there's the 10 knowledge areas. And you can see how these knowledge areas all fit into all of these process groups, right? Process group called planning, we're going to plan scope, we're going to plan schedule, we're going to plan cost, etc. We're going to plan our quality, we're going to plan for risks. Executing, we're going to be executing and monitoring and controlling against all of these different aspects as project managers. So that's what we're going to get into in the coming weeks. What I want you to do between now and next week, 8 questions. I'm sorry, 8 questions at the back of these slides. Multiple choice questions. Multiple choice questions. You just do them. We'll discuss them next week. It'll serve as a review before we move on and cover integration and scope management. Read the chapters in the PMBOK book. Okay, if you haven't obtained it yet, go out and get it. Like I say, I'm not going to tell you to do a Kindle download, but it might be the best way of getting it under these circumstances now. If you're comfortable with it, if you're not comfortable with it, and you need the paper, order it, and you might have to do a lot of heavy duty reading when it arrives, because it might not arrive very quickly. If you have Amazon Prime, which a lot of people do, you get that free 2-day delivery. You could probably cut off a lot of time in delivery. So with that, unless there's any other questions, I'm gonna end the class, and we'll meet again next Thursday. Same bat time, same bat channel. Actually, not same bat channel. Actually, before we go, I'm gonna have to send you a new link because this broadcast is down. I'll be sending you an email with a new link that you'll use for next week. If you use this link, you'll just see the repeat of this. This is going to be stored out here. It's recorded. You'll just see the same thing you learned last week. So be sure to keep up with the emails and the new link. Okay? Yes. 1, 2, and 3. Chapters 1 through 3 are the chapters that we covered. I'm going to send out an email every week. You're going to get used to getting an email from me on Friday mornings. Basically, what it's going to say is, what did we do last night? What assignments should I be keeping up with between now and next week? And what we intend to cover next Thursday. Okay? In addition to that, the link for where to dial into next Thursday. Or 4 or 5. No, not 4 or 5. Yes, chapters 1, 2, and 3. Okay? Don't read 4 and 5. 4 and 5 is integration and scope. We get to that next week. I want you to read after. I don't want you to read in advance. Okay? So with that, I'm going to sign off. I think everybody's got it. Technology works fine. If you have any comments about that, I'll be happy to listen to them. I don't know that there's much I could do. This is kind of the format we're going to be in. But certainly if there's anything we could add to it to make this better, timing-wise, etc., I'm all ears. Okay? Thanks.